Hey, I'm Lindsay Lyman. I worked almost 12 years at Amazon and saw so many brilliant and successful overachievers burn themselves out and leave their jobs because they're so stressed and anxious. But guess what? Having a successful career does not have to be at the expense of your mental sanity and personal time. There's an easier way, and I can show you how. Let's do this. Today is part one of a two-part series where we are going to dive deep into the three elements of trust. So if you're not subscribed to this podcast, make sure click the little plus sign, the three little dots, depends on what platform you're listening, but make sure you subscribe so you can catch part two, because what I want to talk to you about is so important and so good, and there's so much I want you to think about. I decided to break this up into two different episodes. As you know, I worked at Amazon for about 12 years, and Amazon has, I don't know where they landed, 13, 14, 15, they keep changing it, a handful of different leadership principles. And these aren't just leadership principles that sound good, that they talk about every now and again and throw up on a banner. Like at Amazon, you live and breathe through these leadership principles. This is how we evaluate people to hire. This is how you would get promoted. You needed to be able to show these different leadership principles. A pretty common question people ask about them is, which one do you think is the most important? And I used to think that there wasn't one that is more important than the rest, because they all are important in different ways. But the longer I worked there and the more I thought about them, I do actually think there is one foundational leadership principle that if you don't have, the rest of them are kind of irrelevant and fall apart. And I think that is the principle of earning trust. If you can't trust that your coworkers are doing their part, it's hard for you to feel like you're working on a team that's going to be successful. If you don't trust your manager to back you up when you are not in the room, it's hard for you to focus and come up with big ideas and be willing to try new things and excel at your job, because you're going to spend a lot of your time watching your back, feeling like you have to walk on eggshells, making sure you cover your tracks, that things are documented. When trust is not there, it's very hard for your nervous system to feel safe, to feel like this is a good place for you to be, and it's hard for your brain to optimize at its highest level when that's how you physically feel. I think trust is also a foundational element needed to work together successfully in a team, because as humans, we are so good at reading each other. You know when someone is BSing you, when they're telling you what you want to hear, but it's not actually the truth. There's biology behind this, in that we're neurocepting all the time. In essence, how I'm feeling, I'm giving off that feeling, and your nervous system is perceiving that. And you and I, if we're having a conversation, are neurocepting back and forth all the time. This is why you can walk into a room and you can feel the tension, because your body is able to neurocept that emotion. As humans, we have so many little tells we're not even consciously aware of, like your pupils will dilate or your voice inflection changes. There's a lot of subconscious tells that happen because your nervous system takes over and your brain and your body follow accordingly. So if you don't have trust, being able to deliver, being able to be an owner, insist on the highest standards, all these other leadership principles that are great, they don't matter, because without trust, there's no foundation for us to keep moving forward on. I recently went to a conference, Entre Leadership, where there was a lot of great speakers and so many good things came out of it. One of the speakers, Craig Rochelle, talked about trust, and it really hit home for me. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the message he gave and kind of my interpretation of it and how I think it applies to what we are trying to do in the work setting. So he identifies the three elements of trust are transparency plus empathy plus consistency equals trust. Okay, and I want to dive into these three different elements through a few different lenses here. So let's start with transparency. When I think of this, I kind of think of it in two different lenses. The first is not being caught by surprise, not surprising your manager and not having your manager surprise you as well. I've worked with a lot of different leaders, and one of my favorite leaders at Amazon, he used to always say, don't make me famous. for anything good or anything bad, but basically don't surprise me. Let's be totally transparent as we work together as a team. There was an experience where I was working for an advertising agency and I was based in Seattle, but the company I worked for was based in New York. And so my team was remote, but the client I worked with was also based in Seattle. So I was local with a client and would commute back and forth from New York all the time. There was also a partner agency in Seattle that worked with the same client. So I actually had a desk at the client's office, at the partner agency's office, and back in New York. It was a really fun time in life, I won't lie. But I remember there was a series of events where the head of this partner agency was working on pitching something to our client, and I was kind of helping them try to land this business. And the way I went about creating one of the decks, he did not like. And it was very apparent that he was ticked off and he was mad. And I was like, uh-oh, this is not going to go well. He didn't say anything to me about it. He wasn't talking to other people about it, but I knew he was not happy. So I want to make sure that I'm working from a place of trust. And as an employee that my entire team was based in New York, I had to make sure that I was very transparent and openly communicated with my team. So I called my manager and was like, hey, heads up, I don't know if you've heard from this person, but just so you know, they're mad at me. Here's what happened. Here's why I did what I did. Here's what I'm trying to do to fix it. Do you have any other ideas or suggestions? Again, I was just trying to be transparent. They were appreciative of it. This person hadn't contacted them yet. They did contact them, but they weren't caught by surprise. They knew. I came to them. I was transparent. I was open. I was honest. When that's how I was showing up, they knew they could trust me. I wasn't trying to hide things from them, right? Transparency, it's a key to trust. The other part of transparency, it doesn't mean you're spilling the tea, that you're telling all the details of things that aren't necessarily appropriate to share. I don't think that's what we mean by transparency, but it's being open and honest and sharing what is appropriate. So, for example, if you've ever worked on a team where someone has been managed out because of low performance, everyone on the team knows, okay? But if they're a good leader, they haven't come out and said, oh, Sophie's on a performance improvement plan. If you see her acting in a different way, or if all of a sudden she doesn't come to the office one day, that's why. I'm like, no, that's not appropriate. We're not talking about transparency from a gossip and tell inappropriate things. We're talking about it from a be open and honest with people. People on the team know when someone has been managed out. As a manager, you want to be transparent and say, hey, this person isn't here anymore. We're going to have to pick up some of the slack. It's important that we're delivering on goals, but everyone's good. We're going to keep moving forward. We're going to try to backfill this person, or we're not going to backfill this person. Does anyone have any questions? Like, you just tell them what's appropriate, but be transparent about it. As we think about transparency in the terms of trust, I think this is where companies have completely dropped the ball on return to office. Remember, trust is transparency plus empathy plus consistency. Now, you could argue they've kind of dropped the ball in a little bit of all these areas, and I wouldn't argue with you on that. But I think a lot of companies did a terrible job at being transparent. And they kind of tried to tell people the PR line of why they had to return to office. And they were trying to tell them it's to build team morale, or it's because this has always been the policy at the company, or we think people work more effectively. I think the truth of the matter is they wanted people to work in the office. They don't have a very good data-driven, everyone's going to like reason why. And I think there's maybe a lot of reasons why. And that's okay. But they weren't willing to come forward and say that. They weren't willing to say, hey, we pay a lot of money to rent these buildings. Hey, we have a lot of tax breaks from the city because people are coming into the city and stimulating the economy, right? They're not saying those things. They're not saying because we just feel like we work together as a team when we're in the same room. They're not saying those things, right? They were trying to kind of tiptoe around it. And I think the transparency was totally lost. And you have to have all three of these elements to have trust. If you only have empathy and consistency, you still don't have trust, right? So return to office was, yes, I understand this is hard. I know we don't want to do it. What can I do to help? And they consistently maybe delivered that message, but the transparency wasn't there and people knew it. You know when you're being given the company line, okay? Transparency plus empathy plus consistency. Let's talk about empathy for a minute. The definition of empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Okay? So empathy, understand the feelings of someone else and share the feelings of someone else. Essentially, this is letting people feel how they need to feel. It's the opposite of like this toxic positive leadership culture a lot of companies try to create. If you're trying to build trust with your team and you don't understand or agree with the response someone else is having, you're going to struggle to build trust. I think of this in terms as a lot of people I work with have recently been really frustrated with their yearly compensation conversations because it was a different conversation for many people this year and it was pretty disappointing for them. As a leader who's delivering that message, if you're frustrated because you're thinking this person should be appreciative that they even still have a job, I went to bat and fought for them and did everything I could to get this 1% pay increase, whatever your response is. If you're frustrated at how the other person is responding, you don't have the empathy right there, right? If you can't understand why they are responding this way, even if you don't agree with it, but if you can't see why they might have that response, you won't have empathy. You can pretend, but remember, as humans, we can call each other out. Pretending to have empathy is not the same thing. I saw this a lot during the early stages of COVID as people were starting to work from home. It was a rough transition in the work environment I was in. In the line of work that I was doing at the time at Amazon, needing to switch our entire workforce to working from home quadrupled the work our team needed to do overnight. And at the same time, we're humans going through this experience. Our kids are coming home from school and we're being told we need to help our kid do school online all day. And we're worried about our loved ones and those that are at risk from a health standpoint. We were going through all this. The leader of our team in that situation, I think they really did try to have empathy, but I don't think they understood what we were going through. And they weren't able to understand and share the feelings of what we were experiencing. And there was not a lot of trust there. There was a lot of frustration and resentment and late nights and hustle, and it was rough. That experience didn't create trust on our team because the empathy was not there. But when you are highly empathetic in a healthy way, I think this can also really help build trust on a team. My last gig at Amazon, I was on call 24/7 and I would work with the incident management team. So when there was an issue or a problem, basically my team was one of the teams that would get paged in to jump on a call and figure out what was going on. And we dealt with some really stressful, hard, intense things with executives all the way up the top of the line at Amazon. And it was hard and it was stressful and it's nerve-wracking and there's a lot of pressure to deliver and deliver right and deliver quickly. But what we found is the team that we worked with through these incident management calls, we trusted immensely. They were transparent, they had empathy, and they showed up consistently. But we all went through these hard things together and we could relate to what the other one was feeling. So when one person was getting called out or stuck or a leader was annoyed with them, we understood what they were going through. We could share that feeling with them and we could support them through it and reach out to them and check in with them because we had the ability to understand each other. Because we went through some of these intense emotional situations together, we were able to have such strong empathy. And the trust I have for those people to this day is so strong. So trust, transparency, plus empathy, plus consistency. Now, when we talk about consistency, this doesn't mean you have to be like consistently a happy person. You're allowed to have hard days and bad days and be a human, right? We can still trust each other as we human through all of our days. But if you're the type of person where we never know which version of you we're going to get, it's rough. If you feel like sometimes your manager has your back and sometimes they don't, it's really hard to know if you can trust them because you don't consistently show up. In high school, I did data entry at an accounting company, and the leader of this company, they were actually the owner, like an amazing human, brilliant, smart, fun, supportive, crazy. Like they would shut down the office every now and again and take us out to lunch and take us shopping and like just do these fun, crazy things. But they also had this pendulum that would swing the other way. And they would have days where they were so unpredictable and they were yelling and slamming doors and just being rude to each other. And you could hear them yelling in the office in the back. And it was just a little bit intense, especially as a high school kid that didn't know any better. But I didn't really trust this leader because they didn't show up consistently. I didn't know which version of them I was going to get. You got to show up consistently. Maybe if you're a manager, that might mean showing up to your one-on-ones consistently. Or if you can't make it to every one-on-one, checking in with your people consistently. It means knowing them personally and following up on things. Hey, how was that trip? Hey, how's your kid doing? Hey, tell me about your new dog. Consistency is a key element of trust. I think back to that incident management team as well. They excelled at consistency. They were always on the call. They were always supportive. They were always helpful. They never were pointing fingers at people. They were a safe place to go and ask dumb questions. And they were a team of about 12 different people. It didn't matter which person came on the call. You knew what you were going to get. You knew there was empathy there. You know that they were going to be transparent, and there was 100% trust in this team to help support everyone to deliver, to put out the fire that was happening in that particular instance. So my question to you is, as a human being that is a part of a team, which part of these three elements of trust do you think you're the weakest at? Which one do you want to go and work on? For me, it's definitely consistency. I feel like I'm pretty good at being transparent. In fact, sometimes I would overshare things that maybe I shouldn't have shared with my team, but I believed in being transparent and honest. I feel like I do a pretty good job at empathy. Again, I can get better in all three of these areas. But if I look at it, consistently showing up as the kind of person I want to be every single day is definitely where I'd say I have room to improve. So think of these three different elements, decide which area you want to focus on, and look for ways to improve building trust with your team through these different elements. All right, y'all, you got this. We'll talk soon. If what you're learning from this podcast is helping, this is just the beginning. Each week, I offer a limited number of coffee chats so that you and I can connect one-on-one and talk specifically about what's going on for you. You'll leave this call feeling more hopeful and motivated, but I'm also going to teach you a few things to try right away to get unstuck. Space is very limited and these are free, so grab your spot before they're gone. Click the link in the show notes or go to lindsaylymancoaching.com/chat and sign up today. You got this.